Good morning. Today is Sunday, December 10th, 2023. Women and men have the same obligation to observe and celebrate Chanukah. Some women fulfill their obligation of lighting the menorah with their own menorah. Others may choose to join in the lighting with another, for example, a wife with her husband. Either way is fine, but a woman has the same mitzvah obligation to light the menorah as a man does. However, there is an aspect of Chanukah to which women are more connected than men. The Shulchan Aruch, Code of Jewish Law, codifies the following custom, minhag. Hanashim v'nohagos hanashim, women have the custom, shlolasos malacha b'l'od sha'neros dolkos, that during the first 30 minutes after the Chanukah menorah is lit, women have the custom not to do any work, not to be cooking or cleaning or any other kind of work, but rather to sit and to gaze on the Chanukah menorah light, to meditate. And in other words, in some sense, women have a special connection to Chanukah that men do not have. The Mishnah Brura, famous commentator to Shulchan Aruch, explains, because one of the miracles associated with Chanukah happened at the hands of a woman, so women have this special connection to Chanukah, and as a consequence of that, women are asked to take this time to spend more time thinking about the significance of Chanukah and gazing at the lights and not being disturbed by doing any other kinds of work. And there is a consequence to this that applies both to men and women. It's very interesting. The Ramah, Rabbi Moshe Isserles, continues, Yesh omrim, some say, sheyesh lechol gvina b'Chanukah, that there is a minhag to eat cheese on Chanukah. Very interesting. Nowhere in the Shulchan Aruch, in the Code of Jewish Law, is there any mention of eating foods cooked in oil. There's no mention of latkes. There's no mention of sufganiot. The only traditional food mentioned as special to Chanukah is gvina, cheese. Lefi shahanes nase b'chalav, because the miracle that we're referring to, that was done by a woman, was done with cheese. Shehachila Yehudis es ha'oyev. Yehudis, this Jewish woman, had in her tent this high-ranking Assyrian Greek general, and she fed him cheese. And the cheese made him thirsty. And he drank wine, and he became drunk, and she cut off his head. And because of that, it was a miracle. What's the story? So the Mishnah Brura again gives us the story. Yehudis was Bito Shel Yochanan Kohen Gadol. She was the daughter of Yochanan Kohen Gadol, Yochanan the high priest. That means she was the sister of Matisyahu. Yochanan Kohen Gadol had a son named Matisyahu. His family were the Maccabees. And he had a daughter named Yehudis. And the Mishnah Brura tells the story that this high Assyrian Greek general, excuse me for using these words in public, gathered a number of Jewish women together to assault them, to rape them. Ve'achila l'rosh hatzarim gvin l'shikruso. And Yehudit gave this top general cheese. It made him thirsty, and then wine made him drunk. V'chaksa es rosho, she cut off his head. Ubarchu kulam, and all of these Jewish women were saved from this terrible fate of being assaulted, God forbid, and raped, God forbid. It's eerie how similar this narrative, which is in Shulchan Aruch, Mishnah Brura, going back over 100 years, it's eerie how similar it is to the atrocities of Hamas that we are learning more and more about today, the sick, perverted, disgusting, depraved attacks directed at women on October 7th and since. But there is something else happening this Chanukah, 5784. Last week, there was a heartbreaking article in the New York Times written by Miriam Jordan. And it begins, the 6 mothers had gathered in a Jerusalem home on a recent Friday to prepare challah. After they recited the bracha, each woman added a prayer of their own. Collectively, these 6 women had 10 sons serving in the Israeli army, either in Gaza, or in the north, or in the West Bank. One of the mothers said with her voice breaking, "I just want everyone to come home alive and in one piece, mentally and physically." Another, wiping away tears, said, "May they return in peace." Ruthie Tick is the woman who convened these mothers so that they could comfort one another. And she said, with this challah, I want to bless my 3 sons who are in the army and all the soldiers. No sooner had the women finished praying than a WhatsApp message appeared on the phone of one of them, and her son said, "I'm going to be without a phone soon. I love you very much, and I will be in touch." And of course, his mother knew that meant he was entering Gaza. As the war drags on, the mothers said they are grappling with intensifying, sometimes debilitating anxiety. And to cope, some have turned to their faith for solace. Others meditate, or both. Many have joined support groups. Einat Whitman started an organization called Drafted Women, a support group with over 100 participants in the town of Binyamina, in order for the women who are there, the mothers and the wives of these soldiers, to be able to support each other. And she said, the war falls on the shoulders of women, mothers, and wives. The agony is not just on the battlefield. And we know, of course, that today in Israel, a large amount of the volunteer effort, which is overwhelming to begin with, but a large part of that is to support and to help mothers whose sons are in battle, women whose husbands are not heard from for weeks at a time, who are raising their children alone, who have financial difficulties because work has stopped, who don't know whether their son or their husband or their father will return, and if so, in what condition. The agony is not just on the battlefield. But now, This year, Chanukah 5784, there is something else. Yehudit's legacy has returned. Times of Israel article begins when a group of young Israeli women were woken up at 6:30 a.m. on October 7. They had no idea they would be making history as the first female armored crew in Israel and in the world to participate in active battle. Later they gave an interview and they said that they spoke of thundering along main roads to get to some of the 20 southern Israeli communities that came under massive assault that morning, running down terrorists and securing breaches in the border with the Gaza Strip. One of the officers in the unit, identified as Hagar, told the interviewer, "My commander came into our room at 6:30 a.m., wakes us up, tells us there's a terrorist infiltration. We didn't really understand the enormity of the event." These soldiers are part of a company of all-women tank operators, which had become permanent within the IDF in 2022 after a 2-year pilot program. On the morning of October 7th, they left their base at Nitzana on the Egyptian border, so that's all the way down to the south, and drove north as fast as they could in tanks and in an armored Humvee. At first, they discovered breaches along the border with Gaza, along with dozens of terrorists. Leaving a tank there to protect the border and prevent more Gazans from flooding into Israel, they headed to Kibbutz Holit, while also sending a tank to battle Hamas terrorists at Kibbutz Sufa. They told me there were terrorists in all the trees around me, so we just started firing. We started firing bunker busters at the terrorists that were up close, and then mortar shells at those further away. Hila, also a commander, said that none of them had been trained on the weapon system installed in the armored UV. Within 10 minutes, we'd all become experts. How to run it, how to fire, how to slam the brakes. 10 minutes, we were experts. We saw terrorists everywhere, and I told the driver, just run them down. We get there to a kibbutz, and the gate is closed. A shell-shocked soldier runs out shouting, "Terrorists, terrorists," so we smash through the gate. The interviewer asks them, these women, about the first time shooting at terrorists. A commander identified as Tamar said, "I feel like it's exactly what we were trained for. We were really prepared for everything. We just did what our brains and our hands knew how to do." In the moment, you don't think, am I saving that person or that home? You understand. There is a terrorist, and I have to kill him before he gets into one of the border communities. The commander of this brigade, Commander Shemer Raviv, said he couldn't be prouder of his female armored crews who battled terrorists for about 17 hours straight on that day of October 7th. The commander said when the tanks arrived, they broke up the battles. Once they took up those two positions, the terrorists understood they could either run or they would die. And the girls in those tanks, the warriors, with 3 tanks at that point in the attack, they fought in a most impressive way. They operated in such a way that they were seemingly not trained for. They fired inside Israeli communities, drove on main roads, and I believe, this is the commander, I believe that thanks to their actions in that area, we prevented the attack from moving further south. We know now that there were Hamas plans to move to many, many other communities. And this group of all women soldiers at least stopped the attack from moving further south. But the soldiers were not quick to accept accolades for their historic battle. Hila said, "So what? What does it matter? Did the terrorists know there were girls in the tanks? No. You think they saw Michal's hair sticking out of her helmet? No. Boys, girls, what does it matter? Tamar agreed. You keep saying heroes and historic. I don't feel like a hero. I feel like I'm a soldier that was given a job, and I did my job. I think anybody would have done that. Hagar said, there was no time to be scared. You think about the civilians trapped in their homes and the people that needed us. You understand there was no room for fear. A few weeks later, this unit gave a report of their activities that day to the chief of the general staff of the Israel Defense Force, Lieutenant General Herzi Halevi, telling the story how this female tank crew made history. Again, not just Israeli history, but history, period. And Halevi gathered a group of soldiers around and a videographer to preserve this moment. And he said the following words. He said, as you know, there has been an ongoing conversation in Israeli society over the past years as to whether or not women should be in combat positions. Sometimes one needs to speak a great deal to explain something. We tried it in practice drills. We tried it in training exercises. We tried it in operations in normal times. But I think that here, on that day, we received an answer without words. It's the answer that comes from performance in wartime combat. This week, the Israel Defense Force said that it had seen a massive spike in female conscripts seeking to join combat units during the war with Gaza. Over the last week, the IDF has drafted young women to various combat units. The Army said it has seen a draft turnout above 100%, meaning the numbers that it had initially planned for. And said that 12% of women now joining combat units had asked to change their placement to those fighting roles during the war. This Chanukah 5784 will be remembered for many things. But high on the list will be the return of the legacy of Yehudit and her contemporary sisters. Not female soldiers, but excellent soldiers who happen to be female. All needed to help save and protect the Jewish people. So please keep this in mind as you eat some dairy foods and sit and contemplate the lights of the menorah tonight. Happy Chanukah. I wish you a good day, and I look forward to seeing you soon in person.